If you hear anything, Emerson is literally right there and she's dreaming. Looks like she's about to wake up. I might have to stop this before I even start to breastfeed. Hi Daily family, this is my labor and delivery story. I filmed a birth vlog and I kind of explain what was going on, when it was going on in the birth vlog, but there's a lot that I left out, especially because I wasn't allowed to film the actual pushing and the actual delivery. So I'm here to kind of go through the whole story in case you guys were curious. I filmed a labor and delivery story with my son Grayson. So I have a list of what I talked about in that video to kind of get a rough gauge of what I should talk about here. My labor and delivery was 100% different between my two children. So some of the talking points that I talk about in Grayson's labor and delivery story won't really make sense here. Like, let's start from the beginning. So doctor's appointments. So I was induced. I did not go into labor like naturally. In the weeks leading up to my 38-week appointment, I was having Braxton Hicks contractions kind of periodically and sporadically throughout those weeks leading up to my 38-week appointment. And from my previous doctor's appointments, they did internal checks and I was only 1 centimeter dilated, and I had gone from 30% effacement to 50% effacement from 37 weeks to 38 weeks. So that was kind of my natural progression of things, very slow, not much changed in terms of dilation. So that brings us to my 38-week appointment. On my 38-week appointment, it was actually Pat and my 4-year anniversary the day before. So we actually decided to both take off of work on Friday, which was my 38-week appointment, to kind of celebrate together. Grayson was in daycare and we were like, let's do brunch beforehand. We're gonna go to our 38-week appointment and then we're gonna decide to do something afterwards. So we were both off. However, because I wasn't really progressing a lot and I didn't have any major contractions or whatever, we did not think that we needed to bring along our hospital bag. So we left that at home. Pat actually dropped his car off at the auto repair place because his AC tube was leaking or something. So we ended up dropping off his car at the auto repair place and then headed on to our 38-week appointment. She did the internal check. I was still only 1 centimeter, so she wasn't able to swipe my membranes or anything like that. She did say I was more effaced, so that was good news for me. However, when she did the belly check, the over the belly check, she was measuring, it's called the fundus, which is the top of the uterus, I guess. So she measures the uterus and not the actual baby, but she measures where your uterus is. And so she was like, you're measuring smaller this week than you were last week. And she's like, that could either be because the baby is lower in the birthing canal or you have low amniotic fluid. So she said, I'm going to order you an ultrasound. We're going to check your amniotic fluid levels and then you're going to come back and we're going to talk about, the ultrasound. So I was kind of excited because we got to see baby Daly again. While we had to close our eyes through half of it because we weren't finding out what we were having, it was nice to see kind of a fully developed baby on the ultrasound. It was kind of cool. They measured my amniotic fluid and they measured the baby and everything, and they said that the baby was measuring 6 pounds 4 ounces, give or take a pound. After that we went back into the room, and then our doctor came in. And I remember her kind of opening up the door and peeking in, and she's like, you guys are gonna have a baby. And I was like, yeah, I kind of know this. And she was like, no, today you're gonna have a baby. So we had kind of discussed that if the results of the ultrasound came back and I did have low amniotic fluid levels, that they would they were talking like induction, but I just didn't know when. She was like, you have really low levels of amniotic fluid. I don't like the levels that you have. And I've said in numerous vlogs before this, I don't know what the range, what like the healthy range is. All I know is what they told me my level was, and it was a 3. And that's really close to 0. So I'm assuming that it wasn't all that great. She had like a sense of urgency in her like tone and what she was telling us. But anyway, things happened so fast between like my 38-week appointment, like from that time when we were discussing the ultrasound to the time that I ended up in the hospital. She's like, I already wrote your ticket, your golden ticket for induction. It was just like orders basically saying that I could be induced, like it was my admission to the hospital, I guess. And I was so ready to have the baby, like at any point. Like I was totally done being pregnant at 38 weeks, but like just the way that it kind of happened, it was very like urgent, or like it was very rushed, and it was a lot to take in and process, especially since we weren't expecting it. So anyway, I was like, oh, she's stretching, she's grunting. So anyway, I was like, so do we have time to like go and get our hospital bag, or like what's the deal here? And the doctor was like, no, we have one bed over there and you need to get in it. And luckily my hospital is like literally right across the street from my OB. Pat had to drop me off because remember, his car is at the auto place. Pat had to drop me off. It was a while before they gave me a cervical ripener. So that's like kind of the next part, is like, I guess my laboring portion of my labor and delivery story. But anyway, it was very contrived and it was all like medically induced, and like my body obviously like wasn't ready to go into labor yet. I was only 1 centimeter dilated. But anyway, they gave me a cervical ripener called Meso, and it's like this little gel capsule, and they like insert it into the cervix area, and it takes about 4 hours to kind of do its job, which is just to soften the cervix. It's not meant to like dilate you or anything, but it's meant to soften your cervix, and in the hopes that your body will like jumpstart contractions like naturally. And basically it was just a waiting game from there. I was able to get up and walk around and, you know, do stuff while I was on Meso. But basically we were admitted into labor and delivery in the afternoon, so like 2 o'clock or so. I was given my first dose of Meso at around 4 o'clock p.m. And basically I just had 4 hours to just sit and do nothing and wait. They checked me again at the end of the 4 hours, so now it's like 8 o'clock. I was like 60 to 70% effaced, I guess, and still I was like 1.5 to 2 centimeters dilated at that point, and I was having very minor contractions. And then at 8 o'clock, they gave me my second dose of Meso, and they were kind of holding off on giving me pitocin until like my body started going, like having contractions naturally. My contractions, I believe at that point, started coming on quicker, and while they weren't like super painful, they were coming more rapidly. And I guess in order to give pitocin, they need to be in like a sweet spot of not too slow and not too fast. And I was kind of more on the verge of the contractions were too fast, like coming too fast. So they actually slowed my contractions by giving me a higher drip of fluids. So yeah, the whole time I'm like hooked up to an IV, like delivering fluids to me. And so they just increased the rate at which they were delivering fluids, which supposedly like slows contractions, and that's what it did. So then like I was kind of in this like sweet spot where they would be able to give me pitocin. At this point I really didn't kind of know what the heck was like going on. I knew that by the next day I was gonna have a baby. So I was just kind of going with the flow. The other thing that kind of happened about this time was the baby's heart rate started going high. Like the heart rate was really high, and then it would like kind of stay high. So like the new baseline was really high, and it was like around 180 to 190, and they were like, they didn't like that. They wanted it to be a little bit lower because it was staying really high for a prolonged period of time. They were like monitoring me really closely at this point, and they gave me oxygen, which I show you in my birth vlog. But they gave me oxygen, and while my oxygenation levels were completely normal, they thought that by giving me oxygen, it goes from the mask, it goes, you know, straight to the baby, and it could, you know, help with this high heart rate and maybe potentially bring it down. They also increased my fluids again. They said that dehydration tends to like stress the baby out. So they gave me a bunch of fluids at this point. And they gave me the oxygen and they gave me like the higher drip of fluids. The baby's heart rate did come down a bit, and then it stayed in the blue, like healthy range. So they were like, okay, great, our intervention worked, and you know, everything's fine. And like I was napping the entire time, like through as well. My contractions weren't painful really. Like I had to breathe through a few of them, but I was still able to nap periodically and get my rest, and I knew what was coming, so I was trying to rest a lot and trying to get a lot of sleep. Pat was like passed out on like the little pull-out couch. Like he was sleeping, and I don't blame him. But yeah, so, you know, I'm hooked up to all this stuff now, and every time I had to get up to go to the bathroom, I had to like bring my little, you know, IV unit and whatever. I had to unplug the contraction and the heart rate monitor, and oh, it was just like, it was fun time trying to go to the bathroom. I don't remember if I lost my mucus plug before they put me on pitocin or after they put me on pitocin. I think it was, I'm not sure. There was one point that I got up to use the restroom and I lost my mucus plug. And I told the nurse that, you know, I think I lost it. And she's like, that's great news, blah, blah, blah. That means you're progressing. But then from there on, I felt like a trickle of just like wetness down there. And I told her, like, I asked her, do you think my water broke or whatever? So she did a test. I guess there's this like little piece of paper that changes color in the presence of amniotic fluid. So she swiped down there with like the little test strip or whatever. It came back negative, and she's like, maybe it's just like increased mucus or whatever because you lost your mucus plug and yada yada. So I was a little discouraged that my water didn't break. She did an internal check just to see, and I was like 3 centimeters dilated at this point. So at this point, the meso time was up. It was time to reevaluate and do an internal check on me. And I guess it was determined that I was ready to be put on pitocin. So they put it on like the lowest possible drip. I guess it was like a 1 or something. And this was like, I believe 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So I was put on pitocin. So now it's like one more like thing IV in my arm, and I'm like super hooked up at this point. And mind you, I did test GBS positive. So periodically I had been asking, like, when am I going to get the antibiotics? When am I going to get the antibiotics? I hadn't been put on antibiotics yet. I was still able to sleep. So from like early morning until like sunrise, I was able to get some rest, but then they like periodically upped my dosage of pitocin, and the contractions were coming on stronger, more close together. About 6 o'clock or so, maybe 5 o'clock, they basically said, okay, like you're ready for the antibiotics, because I guess I was like now like a 4 centimeters or so, 5 centimeters dilated at this point, 80 or 90% effaced. You're progressing a little bit more quickly than we anticipated, so we're gonna give you the antibiotics. The contractions were getting really painful at this point, and I had another thing hooked up to my arm through an IV, and that was the antibiotics. And let me tell you, I was supposed to get 2 doses. The first dose they made a little bit like stronger or more or something. There was something more potent about the first dose of antibiotics that I received. I can make the drip slower, but we want to get this in you, and if you can take the pain, like let's just do the high dose. And I was like, okay, like let's do this, because I had been so anxious to get the antibiotics. They delivered the antibiotics through an IV, and this, like the second it entered my system, it burned. It was like this hot, like poker. I don't know why my camera shut off. I was in the middle of telling my antibiotic story. It was burning. It was like a hot poker, like that you would put in coals or like a fire, that somebody was like, and it like, I felt the medicine travel like up my arm, and then it like kind of lingered in my shoulder, basically is where kind of like the hotness ended, like the the sensation of hotness. And like, oh my God, the pain from that, I think, was like worse than the contractions. I sucked it up because I wanted the antibiotics. So I sucked it up and I was like, this sucks. This really sucks. Like, cause the contractions were coming on super strong now. I had this, like, my whole arm was burning. At this point, it was very difficult for me to move around as well, because I had so many things like I was hooked up to. Like at this point, they had the blood pressure cuff on. They had the oxygen, the pulse oximeter on my finger. I had so many IVs in this arm, and then I had the contraction counter and the heart rate counter on my belly. Like, it looked like I was like bionic woman or something. As you saw in my birth vlog, I started to labor on the yoga ball. As with Grayson, I got a lot of like pain in my upper thigh area, like by my hips and through like mid thigh. And it was just like my muscles kind of clenching and tightening every time I got a contraction. And that was more painful than the actual contractions. This time I didn't get a lot of back pain, a lot of back laboring. It was like the thighs that did it in for me. Again, I really tried to breathe through them. I made it this time around to labor without an epidural for like 6.5 centimeters. With Grayson, I think I was like 4.5 or 5. I was really proud of myself that I was able to make it that far along without an epidural, and I was on pitocin. I was laboring naturally while on pitocin, which is kind of a big deal in my mind, because when you have contractions on pitocin, they're very contrived and they come more rapidly, they're stronger. You don't have as much of a break in between as if you were to have contractions like naturally. In my birth plan, my providers already knew that I had wanted an epidural, so it was already ordered for me. I just had to basically say when. And so about 6.5 centimeters dilated, I was like, okay, when? Because with Grayson, I pushed for about 1.5 hours, and it took everything that I had out of me. And I kind of anticipated that being the case this time around. So I was like, I want to save my energy for pushing instead of laboring. So let's just get this show on the road. Give me the epidural. So it was only like maybe 15-20 minutes from the time that I requested the epidural to the time that I received it. That was kind of nice, because these contractions were like, oh my God, I was getting tears in my eyes at this point. They were like really, really painful. I had to sit still getting the epidural, and of course my contractions were coming so close together that there wasn't even a time in between my contractions for the anesthesiologist to give me the epidural. So I basically had to sit still through multiple contractions. So he's like describing step by step, like kind of what he's doing behind me. And he's like, okay, cold iodine going on, blah, blah, blah. I'm placing like this mat for my work area that's going on, you know, like he's kind of describing like what he's doing step by step, which was nice. It was very like comforting to me, like knowing kind of what he was doing without being able to see him. He was like, okay, I'm placing the needle now. And then he's like, where do you feel it? And I got a twinge on the left side of like where he placed the needle. And I told him, I was like, left. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna try and center it a little bit more. And he's like, now you're gonna feel like a little twinge or a little electrical pulse. And I did. The second he said that, I felt like, I don't know how to describe it. It was like a twinge or like a twitch, but literally like I felt this like little like twitch kind of go down from the spot that he pricked my back all the way down to my right butt cheek. And like my right butt cheek was kind of like spasming. And I was like, right, I feel it in my right butt cheek. And he's like, all right, perfect. I got it like in the middle or something like that. He threaded like the little catheter or whatever, like the little tube that delivers the epidural medicine, and then he pulled out the needle and I don't know, adhesive and then some bandages so that way the wire like kind of stuck to my back and whatever. So then he like stayed in the room for about half an hour to make sure that like the medicine was working. I didn't have an allergic reaction or anything like that. And I could feel like in that time I felt like a warmth kind of go across my lower body. However, I felt the warmth more in my right side than in my left. And so he kind of had me kind of like prop kind of sideways toward like on my left side. The epidural is a liquid medication, so like gravity kind of takes over. So by having me propped up kind of this way, it would, like the hopes were that the medicine would kind of travel downward to my left side. I could feel the contractions or whatever, and like slowly it got like more dull. But then there was like a point in which I'm on my side and like my left kind of still isn't getting numb. Like I could feel the contractions very clearly. I could feel the contractions on my left side, and they were getting more and more painful because they upped my pitocin again. They were like unbearably painful, and I could only feel them on my left side. So they had me kind of move more on my side to get the medicine to drain, and they also told me to push the button. And the button delivers like an extra dose of epidural medicine. So it's kind of like a punch kick or something. So anyway, they're like, press the button. So I pressed the button. 15 minutes later, nothing. I could still feel the contractions only on my left side. It was the most weird sensation I've ever felt ever, because it was like half my body, like literally half my body felt everything, and the whole right side of my body like felt nothing. It was the strangest sensation I've ever had. And I could feel the baby's head kind of like grinding on my pubic bone. It was like literally right there, every contraction, but only on half of my body. So turns out that sometimes the epidural doesn't take to a side. While I think knew this somewhere in my brain, it didn't register that that would ever happen to me. So the nurses were like, well, you're far enough along where this process isn't going to take a long time anyway, and you're probably going to deliver in the next 15 minutes or so. But if you're still really wanting like the pain to go away, we can call the anesthesiologist back and he can like redo your epidural. And I was like, no, by the time he gets back up here, like I'm probably already gonna have this kid. So I literally did a half natural, half epidural delivery. I felt everything on my left side, everything. So that was interesting and not fun, to say the least. At this point, I am in excruciating pain. I was like completely on my left side, still hoping that the medicine would like travel that way. I'm gripping onto like the side of the bed, and I'm just saying like in my best mommy voice, because like I don't really swear a lot anymore because of Grayson. But anyway, I'm like, this sucks. This really, really sucks. I am so uncomfortable, and I'm just like grinding my teeth. I'm trying to breathe through the contractions. My whole right side of my lower body is dead weight because I've pressed the button. Like they told me to press the button like two more times. So I had like a ton of epidural medicine in my right side, and it was like literally dead weight. Like it was so limp, couldn't feel a thing on my right side. Finally, I get the urge to push. Now, if you have never gone through delivery before, you literally feel like you have to go number 2. And it's like the urge is so strong that like you can't not push. It's literally like you're going to the bathroom. That's what the pushing feels like. And that's what the sensation to have to push feels like. Like you have to take the biggest number 2 of your life. That's literally, sorry if that's TMI, but that's literally what it is. So anyway, I told the nurses, I'm like, I have to push. I feel like I have to push. And they're like, okay, well, your doctor's not here yet. So you're gonna have to not push. And I was like, are you kidding me? Because I could feel everything on my left side. I felt the head. I felt it like coming out. It was the weirdest feeling because I had the epidural with Grayson, which worked 100%. So I didn't feel really any of that. But this time, like it was horrible. So anyway, they're like, yeah, the doctor that was on call, like my doctor, was not there. He had to wait like 20 minutes or something like that, like a ridiculous amount of time. And the nurses, so like normally you would breathe through the contractions and like be pushing. Well, I was breathing through the contractions and trying not to push. And so like my nurses were like, okay, just think about not pushing. And I'm like, wanted to kill somebody. Finally, I guess like my doctor was there and was like running to my room, and like one of the nurses, I remember like looking up when I like wasn't having a contraction for like a split second. I remember looking up, the nurse was like holding up, you know, like the gowns. My doctor like came in, put her hands through the arms, put on gloves, and like sat down on the stool like next to me and like delivered my baby. That's like how fast everything kind of was moving at that point. Like when she got to the room, I was like, can I push now? And she's like, go for it, honey, go. And I like, so it was one push. I pushed once, and it was like kind of a long push. I like got my breath again and then pushed. So like 1.5 pushes. I'm gonna count it as one push. So one push, the baby was out. My water spontaneously broke at the same time that I pushed. So they count my water, like they recorded that my water broke at 10:26 and I delivered at 10:27. Again, we weren't finding out until little baby was delivered. So none of the doctors told me like what it was. So they like held it up, and of course the like umbilical cord was hanging between the baby's legs, and they like put the baby on me because that's one of the things I wanted to do. I wanted to do skin to skin. So I did that, and the baby like wasn't, like the baby kind of looked purple, like it was an avatar baby. And it wasn't really like crying a lot, and it wasn't really like moving a lot. And like of course, like I don't know what is supposed to happen. Like yeah, I've had a Grayson, but like I don't know kind of what it's supposed to look like. So like I'm excited to see what we had. So like I look under the little blanket that they put, and it's like the funny thing is like when you have a girl, kind of things are like puffy down there. And that's just because all of my hormones are running through the baby's So like just things are kind of like puffy looking. And so like the little like labias kind of look like testicles. And I was like, a boy? I like thought to myself like a boy. And then the doctors were like, what did you have? What is it? What is it? And I was like, a girl. Like I saw that it was a girl. I was like, a girl. And then they asked again, and then I was like, maybe I got that wrong. Maybe they are testicles. A boy? And so then Pat looked and he's like, it's a girl. So we were so excited. And Pat cut the umbilical cord. Like, I didn't even notice that part though. Like, I only had eyes for Emerson, and I was just staring at her. But then like I started to kind of get concerned because like she wasn't moving a lot and like her color, so then I was like, it's more important for you to take her and do what you need to do for her than for me to have skin to skin at this point, because like I was kind of getting nervous, like why isn't she like crying a lot, like, you know. So I actually told them, I was like, please, can you is she okay? And they're like, yeah, we're gonna take her. And I was like, okay, thank you. And so they took her over, you know, to get like weighed and measured weighed and measured and suck, you know, the fluid out and everything, you know, do all of that stuff that they do. So there's like a rating that they give the babies when they come out, and it's called APGARs. I don't know what that stands for or what they look for, but I remember she got an 8, and I think the highest is a 10. So she got an 8, but then they increased her rating as like time progressed, because her coloring got a little bit better and her screaming got a little bit better after they kind of like sucked all that stuff out, probably like amniotic fluid and just mucus and stuff. But yeah, in the beginning it was kind of a little scary because like she wasn't moving a lot and she wasn't screaming a lot. So I'm like, oh God, is she like breathing okay? And that's like one of the things that they say for like GBS positive, like this is what's going through my mind. I'm like, oh my God, like I didn't get the medication in time. So anyway, I was 3 minutes shy of being 4 hours on the antibiotics. And I guess like because she actually ended up being fine and she ended up feeding well and breathing well and whatever, like they didn't keep me for like the 48 hours or whatever. They didn't keep me for additional like monitoring, or her for additional monitoring, which was great because I was like ready to go home. But anyway, all was fine. She ended up like doing fine, and after they, you know, weighed her and did what they had to do over in like the little baby incubator, they brought her to me. I did more skin to skin, and that's when I fed her for the first time. And literally she latched perfectly. Like I brought her up to me. She opened her mouth like so wide and like whoop, and it was like I cried. Like it was so amazing that she was just able to latch so perfectly, and I was so relieved. I'm like, knock on wood, like I hope that this isn't a fluke, and I hope that she continues to breastfeed this way. So I ended up breastfeeding her on both sides. I had to keep her awake because she was like falling asleep, so I like unswaddled her a little bit, and I was playing with her feet, and I was able to do both sides. And she just like she was so peaceful. I re-swaddled her after I fed her. I think I fed her for like a good 20 minutes, 10 minutes on both sides. And then she was asleep, and I gave her to Dad, and I was able to kind of, you know, sit up and just take everything in. And I actually ordered lunch, because last time I remember I like never ate a hot meal. I was so like anxious and like needed to hold Grayson at all times. This time I knew, I was like, I'm gonna give up the baby. I'm gonna give the baby to Pat. I'm gonna take some me time after I, you know, do feedings. I'm gonna eat a hot meal. And like it was just 100% different this time around. Like I kind of knew what to expect, and I knew that I needed to take time for myself to recover in order to be able to care for Emerson the best way I could. So anyway, Dad had Emerson and I ate a hot meal. They moved me up to my maternity suite after I regained like movement in my right leg. So let me talk about that. So my left leg, I could move like whatever. My right leg was still dead weight like an hour or two after they stopped my epidural. Because I had delivered so much medication through the little button, it took forever for my right leg to like, that I could move it. And I felt like Kill Bill at points. I was like, wiggle your big toe. I was so determined to get functionality back because the quicker we could get up to the maternity suite, the quicker Grayson and my in-laws could come, and I wanted to see Grayson so badly. Did that for basically like an hour or so. That was my labor and delivery story. I'm sorry that was like super long. I don't know why, but my camera just like turned off again. Ever since, Emerson has been a wonderful sleeper. She's been a wonderful breastfeeder. And I think I'm going to do kind of a breastfeeding video, sit down video, just because like I'm so like thankful that I can breastfeed, and I'm so like relieved that she's doing so well and that it's not a struggle for me and her. So I kind of want to do a sit down video talking about that. Speaking of, she's totally ready to eat again, but I do want to show you guys little Emerson. This is Emerson, and she was 5 pounds, 14 ounces, 18.5 inches long. She was born at 10/27 on August 5th, and I'm so happy that you guys watched my labor and delivery story, and I'm really happy to share it with you. It's something very special that I can look back on and remember kind of what happened. I totally loved looking back on my labor and delivery story with Grayson. It brings back a lot of memories. There are things that, you know, you just don't remember. Time kind of erases little minute details that you think that you're going to remember forever, and you actually don't. So I'm so happy that I do vlog and that I do feel comfortable sharing, you know, all of this intimate details of my life with you guys and the internet. But mainly I do it for myself and my family to look back on. So this is Emerson. She's rooting right now. She's totally ready to eat. But yeah, she is just the little sweetest nugget. Yeah, totally ready to eat. I'm sorry, hold on. We gotta say goodbye to our daily family. We gotta say goodbye to our daily family. So thank you guys so much for watching my labor and delivery story of Miss Emerson May Christine. And I hope that you all have a fantastic day, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye, daily family. Okay, let's eat. Let's eat.